Welcome to another episode of Connect, where we go beyond Sunday service. This is an interactive or a discussion where we connect or we integrate the normal life issues with the Word of God. And it's a good day today, a bit chilly, but interesting to be able to connect with you today. My name is Helen Kilusu, and I'll be your host for today's session. And today, joining me is Linus Oyogi, who is a clinical psychology from Chiromo Hospital Group. And we have a very informative topic, Linus, today to handle. And the topic is about autism. Yeah, interesting enough because earlier we had assured our viewers, our listeners that we'll be able to unpack issues to do with mental health disorders, and the day is here. So when I was looking at issues to do with autism, I realized something, Mr. Linus. And one thing is about the background and how these came to space, how it came to space for us to be able to know an issue to do with autism. The funny part or a good thing to mention is that there's no a bit of history, and autism was not really known in earlier days. And even as we speak and connect with the Word of God, we only pick a few details which do not really speak into issues to do people suffering in the Bible with issues to do with autism. But again, coming to you today and saying thank you for joining us for this session, being a professional in this field. And I know you love this topic so much on issues to do with autism. Yeah. What is it all about?
When you speak about autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Mm-hmm. By neurodevelopmental means that is a condition that primarily affects the nervous system. Mm-hmm. It belongs to a category of conditions that usually start in childhood, alongside conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what we call ADHD, and specific learning disabilities like dyslexia, dyscalculia, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But specifically talking about autism is a condition that affects an individual's ability to perceive reality in terms of social interaction. Mm-hmm. People who have autism may struggle to reach social cues like understanding or interpreting a joke, understanding whether somebody is serious, and so on and so forth. But specifically looking at the word autism, it comes, the word autism was constructed out of the word automatic. Mm-hmm. Auto basically meaning self, meaning that the symptoms of autism, like struggling with social interaction, may make somebody to withdraw and sort of become like a loner. And that's basically autism in a nutshell.
Okay. Wow. I think it's interesting to get to hear from you because going back to our viewers today and our listeners, a number of us are suffering with the same disorder. We also have perhaps family members who have the same disorder. We have children who have the same disorder. And what surprises me is when you meet people in gathering, even in our churches today, it's rarely when you're able to see somebody or a parent who has come with an autistic child to church. What explains that?
Yeah, first of all, looking at the statistics of autism, mm-hmm. This is a condition that affects, I think, an average of about 30 million people worldwide. So these are enough people to fill an entire country. Mm-hmm. Like the population of Ghana is 30 billion. So a lot of people are affected by this condition. Mm-hmm. The statistics for autism in the United States of America is about 1 in every 50 people. Mm-hmm. That's about 20% of the entire American population. Mm-hmm. And in Kenya here, we don't have studies. The studies on autism are limited, but it is estimated that it's about 4%. So that is double the number of people in America who have autism. Mm-hmm. So the reason as to why parents would choose not to bring their children who have autism to church is because there's still a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health. Yeah, having a child that has got autism is not an easy journey. It's often a very difficult and arduous one, mm-hmm. and it attracts a lot of criticism from the society. You're looked at, people are looking at you differently. Sometimes, in very, very extreme cases, you may have children who have autism who are nonverbal. Basically, they cannot communicate using language. So there may be this sort of things are frowned upon in the society, and we know that mental health has been associated with demon possession, people being bewitched. So there's still a lot of stigma around mental health, and autism has been on the receiving end of that as well.
Interesting. But I would love to encourage or speak to our viewers today. And in the book of Psalms 107, verse 20, says that he sent out his word and healed them. He rescued them from the grave. So it does not mean that because we are suffering from autism, or we have children who are autistic, or our family members who are suffering from this disorder, that God does not know our situations, but he speaks toward our situations. And again, I'm reminded of the book of John chapter 17 and verse 5. When Christ came to this world, he spoke to the Father and told the Father, I want to be glorified once again, like how I used to be glorified when the world did not exist. And this speaks to us today as believers in the house of the Lord, that Christ knows what we are going through, Linus. And because he came to the earth, or rather to the world, and he suffered with us. He felt it, and he still feels the pain that we are going through. But again, to drive this to your attention, what are the main causes? What can we tell our viewers through this discussion about the causes of autism?
That's a very good question that may not have a specific answer. Why? Because there's no known cause for autism. Studies have been done for decades, and scientists can't seem to find the reason why people develop the condition. But one of the most compelling reasons, which has been hypothesized by many psychologists and psychiatrists, is that there's a genetic component to it. That if you come from a family where there's history of autism, then there's a likelihood that either you or your progeny, meaning your children, could develop the condition. So genetics, you may develop the condition due to genetic loading, but they've also been scientists talking about the environment and how it could trigger it. Like having a difficult birth, being born in an extremely difficult situation where the economic situation is not so good, where there's deprivation in food and there's a lot of chaos in society. These are conditions that would make it more likely that an individual will develop autism. But the specific reason or cause for autism is unknown. It's relatively unknown.
It's good for us to be able to understand that, because sometimes we tend to speculate issues and drive ourselves nuts to the same situation. But again, when we look at autism, and when you come across people who are suffering from autism, and you spoke about this issue cropping from an early ages, so does it also have does it vary? Does it has a percentage of this person is 100% autistic, or do we also talk it's mild autism, or how do we categorize autism as a disorder?
That's a good question. Indeed, autism, also called autism spectrum disorder, exists in a spectrum, basically a continuum. So each and every person that has got autism can be placed on a scale based on the level of severity. We've got people who've got very, very subtle symptoms of autism that are oftentimes can go unnoticed, but it doesn't mean that if it is unnoticed, it doesn't affect you. But there's people who have very, very severe symptoms that cannot escape the eyes of many people. So subtle symptoms of autism, which is also called Asperger's syndrome, is whereby people have called high-functioning autistic people who may have the symptoms of autism, but they are not clinically significant to impair functioning in the important areas of life, meaning these people may thrive in school, they may also get into a relationship, they may work without much difficulty. But people who have what we call autism disorder, according to the diagnostic manual, are people with very, very severe symptoms of the condition, and oftentimes would require very, very elaborate support in order for them to be able to function at their best.
Wow. Thank you so much for clearing that with us today. But again, I don't know if I'm able to look at somebody and I can be able to tell that they're suffering from autism just as a normal human being. So I would love also to get to understand, and also for our viewers and listeners to be able to understand um, the manifestation of autism. How do I manage to tell that somebody is suffering from autism? How do we bring up that discussion for people to be able to detect?
Yeah. That's a good question as well. But noticing or diagnosing autism and a host of other conditions, because we've got over 300 mental disorders as we know them today on the planet. Autism is one of them. So to diagnose it would only be happen through the help of a qualified practitioner. So you cannot self-diagnose, but you can see there's a way of identifying some of the signs and symptoms of autism. But autism has got two hallmarks. Number one, autism affects an individual in terms of their social interaction and communication. We're going to break that down. And number two, people who have autism tend to have what we call restrictive or repetitive behavior. We'll start with the social interaction and communication. People that have autism may struggle with what we call social reciprocity. They may struggle in terms of reciprocating feelings and emotions. So imagine,
Meaning they are not able to respond to.
yeah. Imagine like having a radar. As human beings, we call ourselves neurotypicals, the majority of the people on the planet. We've got a social or a moral a social compass that helps us detect emotions from people. But people who have autism, it's either the social compass or their moral compass is a bit different or it doesn't exist. So they may struggle to understand things like empathy. They may struggle to understand whether somebody is angry or they're happy. So it's a problem of interpretation of emotion and also expression of it. They may also, especially when it comes to children, they may have problems with joint attention. A good example would be a child who is not able to share their interest or their pleasure in an object with a parent. Maybe they found something interesting like a ball. They enjoy playing with the ball, but they struggle to communicate with their parent that they actually enjoy playing with this ball, or vice versa. They may struggle to understand their parents' enjoyment or their interest in what they do. Thirdly, it could also affect nonverbal communication, also in terms of them expressing themselves nonverbally or understanding of nonverbal communication. For example, a child may struggle to understand you opening up your arms is meaning that you want to carry them, or they may struggle to use nonverbal communication appropriately. For example, they may want you to carry them, but they may not open their arms in order for you to carry them. So they don't know how to do it. They want you to carry them, but they simply cannot communicate nonverbally. Lastly, it could also impact on social relationships. People who have autism struggle to either form relationships or maintain relationships. So they may form relationships well and good, but maintaining them because of the emotional dysregulation, because of the problem understanding social cues, it may be difficult for them to maintain social communication. The second and last symptom of autism is repetitive or restrictive behavior. People who have autism tend to develop very, very strong interest, very strong and specific interests. And as you may be aware, autism is also associated with what we call a savant syndrome, meaning that autistic people tend to be incredibly intelligent. There are people who've got a very, very razor-sharp autobiographic memory. They can remember very, very specific detail of a day and explain to them in very detail. So they may also have a good side, which is associated with this repetitive action. They may develop very, very strong interest. You may see a child lining up their toys in a very, very specific manner. And if you put anything in place, it tends to distress them. So that is the second hallmark of autism: social interaction and restrictive behavior.
Wow, I don't know if I'm also getting you right in this discussion. Does it also mean that people who are autistic have a compulsive obsessive disorder? Meaning, if I'm holding this glass this way, or if I want to put this glass this way, if I go out, I would love to come back and find this glass still in the same position.
Yeah.
Is that how we interpret autism?
Yeah, indeed, autism has been classified alongside a condition called OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. So they share some symptoms, they share some hallmarks. But autism is a completely different condition. Although some children who have autism may develop obsessions or tendencies which are called repetitive behavior, and they really struggle with changes in pattern, changes in timing. They're creatures of habit. They like to wake up at a specific time. You may see a child that likes to follow a specific route to get to school, and any changes becomes completely unbearable for them.
Then again, going through the discussion that we're having today, it seems like, and we will manage to do something else about it. But again, going through the discussion, it's like for the caregivers now, does it mean that they're going to be trained to know how to regulate the condition, or how to also be able to manage the situation of the patients, because we call them patients or clients?
Yeah. Psychoeducating caregivers is key in the treatment of autism, because most children get diagnosed as early as 2. So they may not benefit from therapy really well. Since their parents know them, and since their parents actually spend a lot more time with them compared to any other person, it's important that we train the caregivers. And indeed, formulating the treatment plan for people with autism requires that we talk to caregivers, we psychoeducate them, we empower them in the skills and the behavioral skills that they can use to regulate their children when they're dysregulated, and so on and so forth.
Wow. So you have heard from our speaker today, and it's interesting to also learn that we have some of us even in our church platforms who are also suffering from autism as a disorder, and they're still functioning because to a certain level. But again, I feel like as believers who knows Christ, it's very good for us to be able to understand these issues to do with the mental health disorders. And if we are not well regulated by good interpretation, especially for when we talk about the Word of God, and maybe the theological principles, we might lose it.
Absolutely.
If we go out there and we do not know what we are telling the congregation or the believers, we might lose it. So again, Linus, we have heard quite a lot about this disorder, and sometimes we do not know how to tell about it. The better part is that because today you're here with us, how do we screen and get to really diagnose autism?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at some point I may have mentioned something to do with self-diagnosis is completely discouraged when it comes to mental health. So you cannot diagnose yourself with a mental health condition. If you suspect that you may have some of the symptoms that you've already talked about today, the best thing that you need to do is to reach out to a qualified mental health care provider. But how do we screen for autism? As we mentioned, the symptom starts very young. From as early as the age of 2, you will start to notice some of these symptoms in your child. So if you suspect that, then the first thing that you want to do is to contact a healthcare provider. But when it comes to screening, we don't give self-report questionnaires to young children because they are unable to respond to that. So screening usually encompasses speaking to teachers. So we may give questionnaires to teachers. We have specific questionnaires or psychological assessments that we give to teachers and parents. And based on how they respond to these questionnaires, we can tell, or we can tease out the symptoms that affect these children either at school or at home. So assessment and diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder is largely reliant on the responses that we get from parents and the teachers, and basically the caregivers of the child. But not to say that autism is just a childhood condition, because we have so many people who we are diagnosing with autism who are adults now. People as old as 21, 25, 30, especially what we're calling Asperger's syndrome, because the symptoms are very subtle. Oftentimes they can go unnoticed. So you go through high school, you go through campus, you don't know, and then when you get into an intimate relationship with your partner, then the symptoms begin to manifest really well. So some people may come to get diagnosed for the first time as adults. as well.
And I was meant even to also bring that to our discussion today, because when we started, you heard me say that this was not recognized earlier. I don't know if it was to do with an issue with people who are not well diverse or educated on issues to do with these mental disorders. But when you look at statistics, the graph is going up.
Yeah.
It didn't used to exist or to exist, sorry, but now currently the graph is going up. How do we explain that fact?
This is a personal opinion. I think it's just the size of the net is larger. We have people who are educated. There's education on social media. People are learning about their symptoms of ADHD and autism online on TikTok, and then they're coming to us and saying that I've been struggling with this and I saw this on TikTok. So I think it's an issue of that in the past we didn't have much information, but right now information is actually for free, and people have got access to information. And people are also developing what we call health-seeking behavior. People are struggling and they're actually asking for help. And in the past, we know that we're restricted by societal standards, especially for men, where men have been socialized into thinking that they should not ask for help. So nowadays, we have men actually coming and seeking help, unlike in the past. So that's what I'd attribute it to.
Wow, this is getting interesting, as we said earlier. But again, talking about faith and issues to do with diseases, not only mental health disorders and diseases, we bring back to the church platform and issues to do with faith and issues to do with belief. Because what I've heard people say, and especially out there, is for certain issues like autism, you must have done something for you to have gotten the disease.
Yeah.
We can even trace this in the Bible when in the book of John chapter 9, and when Christ healed a man who was born blind. Remember what the disciples asked Jesus, is it this man who sinned or the parents? So we take it back to now an issue to do with the family. What has the family done for this person to get this disease or this disorder? Does it also apply out there?
I've spoken to a lot of people, especially people whose children have got these neurodevelopmental conditions. And you tend to hear that people think that they are sort of being punished by God. It's a punishment from God that they have the condition. Where I work, we rely on science, so it's evidence-based treatment. We remain within the confines of what our science prescribe for us, but we also know for a fact that other institutions are important. So I've worked with so many psychiatrists personally who refer patients to priests and to pastors, and they get prayed for, and they're well. But we also have patients who are referred to us by priests and pastors, and they're treated medically, and they actually recover. So I think the ideal is to merge both worlds, because I believe that we work together. And best treatment outcomes are experienced when you have institutions like churches and mental health facilities are working together for a common goal, and that is the betterment of people who are ill.
Wow. And I think that is a take home for us today in Connect. Then again, we are also relaying this back when Christ was performing miracles. And one thing that he encouraged, and we had this conversation earlier with you, was miracles came with action. Like Christ will say, faith, but faith without action is dead. Yeah. And every time maybe he healed somebody, Christ will say, pick up your mat and walk. We can also trace this back when Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 1 to 9. And Naaman was very sick, but Elisha instructed him to go and what? Yeah. To wash himself in a river 7 times. And so it means even as we go through these issues, be it medical one, be it mentally medical kind of issues, that as long as we also believe in God, but again, we need to take action.
Yeah.
And the action we are talking here today with you, learners, is about there's a two-way to this issue, that we can refer ourselves to prayer, and we can again go and see specialists to be able to help us moving forward, with the diagnosis and again the treatment. I'm happy you're here with us today, and this has been Connect. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are free to interact with us using our social media handles. And although this is just a session, but you're also free to reach out to us. After this session, please feel free to reach us through Paki and get to know many things about mental health disorders. Thank you so much.